You're listening to PetLifeRadio.com.
Is your pet stressed out? Does your pet need annual vaccines? Which pet is best for a child? Would you know if your dog was in pain? Pet Life Radio presents The Pet Doctor, where you'll learn everything about keeping your pet healthy and happy. From pet care, pet meds and grooming, to pet food, pet insurance, and dental care, this is the place to find out everything there is to know about pet wellness. Whether you have a dog, cat, reptile, or rabbit, you'll find answers for your pets straight from the vets, because it's your pet. Health matters. Please welcome your Pet Doctor host, veterinary media consultant and veterinarian, Dr. Bernadine Cruz.
It's probably happened to you. You casually stroll by the pet store window and you're inexplicably drawn inside and exit with a fur ball of a pup or a kitten. You can't put into words why, but your life just seems incomplete without a quadruped to share your home. And after a tough day at work, you get more comfort from stroking your pet than anything else you can think of. The connections that we feel with our pets have garnered a great deal of press recently, but is this phenomena all in our heads, or can it be explained in terms of cold, hard facts? My guest, Meg Olmert, has unraveled the mystery of the human-animal bond. We'll be right back.
Please have a seat in the waiting room. The doctor will be with you shortly, right after these messages.
Greetings, humans. What planet am I on?
Welcome to Pet Planet. Here's a copy of Pet Planet Magazine, Florida's most informative and fun pet resource magazine. It features heartwarming stories and informative articles from local and national pet experts.
Excellent.
Pet Planet Magazine offers Operation Planet Rescue, helping rescued pets find new homes. And it's available at 500 locations in South and Central Florida and 24/7 on the internet at petplanetmagazine.com. If you're out and about with your pet, you may be featured in Paparazzi, candid pictures of you and your pet. For up-to-date pet-friendly events, activities, and pet-related services and products, Pet Planet Magazine is your final destination.
I shall take this magazine home with me.
Back to your home planet?
No, to my condo in Boca.
Pet Planet Magazine. Check them out at www.petplanetmagazine.com or 352-394-8578. It's out of this world.
Hi, this is Marcy Davis and my service dog Whistle, and we're your hosts of Working Like Dogs on Pet Life Radio. Working Like Dogs is the show where you can learn everything you ever wanted to know about working animals or working dogs. Whether you're a member of a working dog team or you've just seen a working dog or animal out at the mall or the grocery store and you're curious about how these amazing animals work with their human partners, then Working Like Dogs is the show for you. Join us for the inside scoop at Working Like Dogs on PetLifeRadio.com.
Let's Talk Pets on PetLifeRadio.com. Welcome back to The Pet Doctor on Pet Life Radio with Dr. Bernadine Cruz. The doctor is in, and we'll see you now.
I had the opportunity to meet Meg Olmert while participating in a recent panel discussion for an upcoming National Geographic Channel 2-hour special entitled "And Man-Made Dog" that will air in July of this year. This special is based on the book written by Meg called Made for Each Other, The Biology of the Human-Animal Bond. I found the topic, the book, and the woman to be fascinating. It was one of those aha moments when you finally understand why we love our pets so much, and even more importantly, why our pets put up with us. This connection isn't all in our heads, is it, Meg?
No, and thank you very much for having me here today and to talk to me about this book and about this discovery. It turns out that the biology that attracts and bonds us to animals is actually the same biology that attracts and bonds us to our babies and to other humans.
So when we call these pets our babies, it is kind of like they are our babies.
Yes, I mean, you know, it's funny. That's what you find out the more you dig into science, and especially the neuroscience field that is so big now. You find that metaphor is very well based in science. We don't just come up with these ideas, there's a reason we say that. And it is the same chemistry that makes a mother want to pick up a baby and nurse it and hold it and protect it, and for parents in general to want to bond and protect their babies. So it is not at all surprising that we say that we feel that this is our baby or our best friend, because it also bonds. There's the human to human bond, friend and sibling, and all of those things is also run on this chemistry. And it's a chemical connection and understanding we've only discovered 20 years ago. Before then, this chemistry, nobody ever realized that there was an actual chemistry of attraction and attachment that was flowing in all mammals, and much less between them. So it's a brand new understanding that we are made for each other, which is the reason I called the book that, is Made for Each Other. We are, in fact, and that is why we are bonded to our pets, and why we think, even if we don't say they're our babies, we sure as hell say they're our family. And kin is one of the things that this brain chemistry promotes, is a recognition of others as kin.
Now, is this study of neurobiology, you say it's 20 years old, what made people start looking into it? What made you start looking into this? Because correct me and tell everyone in the listening audience that you're not a neurobiologist.
No, I am not. I was writing a television series. I had been asked to develop a series on the history of humans and animals, and I just started doing my research like I always do. And looking at it, I started to interview people who had extraordinary ways with animals. I mean, the dog and horse whisperers, and the people who train elephants, and and being amazed at how some people really have a way with animals, and thinking, well, what is that? Why do some have it and others not? And then I discovered, and again, this was 17 years ago, so the whole animal-assisted therapy research and the therapies themselves were just beginning to get some recognition, and finding out that there were animals that have extraordinary ways with humans as well as humans who have extraordinary ways with animals, and that bringing children with behavior disorders and developmental disorders together with animals was calming them down and making them more social. So children with ADHD and severe behavior disorders could suddenly pay attention and connect with other humans. And then to find out that heart rate comes down and blood pressure comes down when we talk to or stroke our pets, made me ask the researchers why. What is the biological mechanism animals release in us that could bring down heart rate and blood pressure and make mute speak? I mean, there are cases where children with autism who had never spoken, when the therapist that they're working with brings the dog into the room, the child speaks. This is such a big deal. And so I asked this question and found out the answer was, we have no idea. No one's really. It
seems like they would have investigated this, but all of a sudden you started looking into this and you saw a chemical that you thought might be responsible. And you say it's kind of hardwired into our brains. What's that chemical?
It's called oxytocin, and it was the next day in the New York Times. They ran the first story that they ever ran on oxytocin, how they had just discovered how it is responsible for forming very powerful bonds in rodents, and how nursing human mothers make lots of oxytocin, and it calms them down and connects them to their babies. So it perfectly matched the discussion I had just had the day before with that one researcher who was working with these children with behavior disorders. And so I called those scientists and asked them, could this mean that oxytocin is being released in the children that are in this therapy, and that's why they're having these pro-social anti-stress effects? And they said, well, yes, we're just discovering that oxytocin does all these things. And so I said, well, great, well, who's working on this? And they said, nobody. Do you want a PhD? And I said, oh, my gosh, I'm a little busy. But that's what I ended up doing, was just pursuing it nonstop for 17 years until finally I produced this book. But the science kept rolling in too. And so it's called oxytocin, and it was once thought to just be a female reproductive hormone, and now we know it's made in the hypothalamus, and it reaches out to every section of the brain that controls behavior and emotion, and that it does all these amazing things in lab rats, in sheep, in monkeys, and the same things in humans. It promotes trust and bonding.
It's not just a female hormone, so males and females both have it. Do women have more of it, or are we more receptive to this particular hormone?
We are, because we make a lot of estrogen, and estrogen basically fertilizes oxytocin. So women really do specialize in it, which does make a lot of sense since we are the ones who bear the children and produce the breast milk. But men make it too, and it's vital in men as a to promote social bonding for them and for the anti-stress value too. So it's a much bigger chemical than anyone realized. In fact, it is sort of the hottest molecule being studied right now for everything that from shyness to autism, and it goes on from there. I mean, it's really quite the it chemical now after all these years.
So see what you started 17 years ago. You should be proud of yourself.
Well, I certainly can't take that credit, but you see it all the time as a veterinarian, how people are so bonded to their animals. And that their animals, the animals are bonded to them. I mean, this is not in our brains. These animals are so attached to us, and it's a feedback system that gets created because here's the great thing about oxytocin. All the senses trigger it when anything good happens, like touch and warmth and a nice-sounding voice and a loving look and a smile. Every sense, when we perceive friendly, nurturing signals from another being, that releases oxytocin. So oxytocin is very much connected to the world around us and connects us to it.
So for the next political campaign, that politician who releases the most oxytocin in the voters is probably going to become the next elected official.
Well, what we know about oxytocin, very interestingly, is when you give, and this is the fun thing now, because, for a long time they said, well, it does it in rodents, but that doesn't mean it does it in humans. And you can't do the kinds of invasive brain studies that you do in lab rats, and we won't even go into the ethical nature of that, which is highly skeptical. But the point is, we now can give humans inhalants of oxytocin in laboratory settings, and what we find is it increases trust. So when you talk about the next election, it is the person who we trust that we want to give the reins of government to. And so that's why trust is so important. It's why when you have a candidate who is, shows infidelity like John Edwards, big mistake. And what is it that we really don't like about him? That he broke the bond. And so that's sort of an interesting thing. He committed a crime against oxytocin, you could say, and he's getting punished for it.
Question for you. You had mentioned a little bit earlier that there seem to be some people that are the animal whisperer. They just have a way with animals. Do these people give off more oxytocin, or kind of in the reverse? There's those animals you go, oh, this is the best dog I've ever had, or this is the best cat I've ever had, or rat. Are these animals inducing us to release more? Have the studies been done on this yet?
No, and that is something I can't emphasize enough, is that these are such early days. It took me forever to even get the leading oxytocin experts to start looking at the release of oxytocin between humans and animals. I mean, people didn't think it was important to look at. And yet now there's, as you said, it's a big boom, especially dog studies right now. But what we do know is this, that every creature makes their own patterns of release of oxytocin and the number of receptors in the brain. They're very individualized. So you'll have a species type release of oxytocin, but within the species there's a lot of variation. So we know that there are people who make more oxytocin and have more sensitive oxytocin receptors, like women, because we have estrogen, but also just individually. And it's been linked now to things like paternal care, that women who make more oxytocin report feeling more connected to their babies and spend more time in loving contact with them. So everybody varies in how much oxytocin they make based on their genetic and their epigenetic. The way they were brought up has a big deal to do with this.
Are they looking into this, Meg, for kind of the postpartum blues women?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Postpartum blues, they're looking into it for postmenopausal women who all of a sudden we become very susceptible to heart attacks because we've lost the anti-stress protection that we had because our estrogen drops and our oxytocin drops. So it's being looked at for many, many things. But getting back to your question about what about people who have a way with animals or the extraordinary dog, let's say, or cat that you've met in your life, yes, absolutely. I'm certain they will discover that those are the people who they give off a sense of confidence, they give off this a smell. I'm sure there's a smell, a pheromonal smell perhaps attached to it, and that is why animals feel most comfortable around them and why some animals really elicit it in us more than others, and probably why you went on to become a veterinarian, because you probably make a lot of it, and that's what made you look at animals the way that you did, so intently and want to spend so much time around them.
Well, speaking of time, I want to take a short little break right now. We're listening to Meg Olmert talk about why we have this relationship with our pets. It's not all in our heads. It's not all in our hearts. There's a chemical basis to this. And when we get back, I want to talk to you, Meg, about how man and our prehistoric man and wolves came to have a bonding that really led us both to where we are right now. So we'll be right back after this short break.
Please have a seat in the waiting room. The doctor will be with you shortly, right after these messages.
It's time for school for you and your friends, your furry best friends. Train your dog the fun and easy way with Teacher's Pet Sessions. Teacher's Pet host Pia Silvani teaches you step-by-step how to train your dog the fun and easy way. You get 8 30-minute live audio training sessions, complete transcripts of each session, plus a basic training manual to get you and your dog off to a great start. Training begins the moment you bring your dog home. Teacher's Pet Sessions offers positive reinforcement training to shape your dog's behavior and encourages upbeat, enthusiastic responses to ensure that your dog will enjoy learning. Teacher's Pet Sessions dog training is fun at both ends of the leash. So listen, learn, and laugh with your dog with Teacher's Pet Sessions. Get your copy of Teacher's Pet Sessions Volume 1 today. To order, go to teacherspetsessions.com.
Hi, this is Pia Silvani, your host. Bring your dog, tug toy, and treats, and get ready to have some fun.
teacherspetsessions.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pet Life Radio proudly presents DSPN, the Dog Sports and Performance Network. Get ready to unleash the dog sports enthusiast in all of us, from speed joring and mushing to racing, agility, and competition. This is the place to learn all about the dog sports and activities that you can do with your furry best friend and canine competitor. So get ready for game time. DSPN with your host, Lori Williams, every week on demand. Only on PetLifeRadio.com.
Let's talk pets.
Let's talk pets
On Pet Life Radio.
Pet Life Radio.
PetLifeRadio.com. Welcome back to the Pet Doctor on Pet Life Radio with Dr. Bernadine Cruz. The doctor is in, and we'll see you now.
Meg, thank you so much. I think a lot of people are listening to your explanation of why they have this association, why they feel the way they do, and why we consider these pets to really be part of the family, why they're our kids. So we're not crazy. There's a chemical reason for it.
Well, we're chemically crazy, at least.
I like that one. Okay. As I was mentioning before the break, you and I had the opportunity to be on a panel for National Geographic Channel for this upcoming special and Man-Made Dog, which I think some people will take a gasp at that title. Tell us a little bit about that and why you believe that it was this oxytocin that caused the wolf to morph into the dog we have today, and why prehistoric man was allowed to morph into the people we are today.
Well, what we know about oxytocin is it creates behavior that you would consider tameness. When I look at somebody and I see their face and let's say they're just looking at me with a very neutral look or a smile, my oxytocin tells the amygdala, the fear center of the brain, that this person is okay. This person should not make me want to fight or flee, which is what wild animals do. They fight or they fly away from us and keep a distance. So what it does is it quiets the centers of the brain that make us wild. It quiets the amygdala, the fear center. And it activates, and the stress centers, the hypothalamic pituitary stress axis and the central nervous system axis that, it again, keeps this fight-flight reflex going in us. So it quiets that whole thing down and replaces it with a chemistry that urges us to connect with others and calms us down when that connection proves to be friendly. As soon as we touch one another, we start to release it more, and we become further and further calmed, and a sense of connection rises. This is basically describing how a wild animal will come up and eat from your hand for the first time, let's say. All of those signals have to happen first, so you have to have the approach, you have to have the interaction, and then you have the relaxation. That's what oxytocin does, we now know, through laboratory experiments, and so that is the quintessential description of tameness. Now, there's no way to know what happened in any kind of soft tissue during evolution. Our fossils that are left behind are skulls, bones, teeth, stone. We just don't have the record of soft tissue. What we do have left for our consideration is the behavior. So we know that humans started to come together and live together in larger groups. We know that there was greater trust and cooperation that had to be happening for these groups to come together and people to live comfortably in large cooperative social settings, larger villages, larger bands of people coming together. That would indicate that there was a rise in oxytocin in humans during the Ice Age. And then we definitely know that from the DNA evidence and from the fossil evidence that somehow we got wolves to become dogs.
And isn't it true that those wolves really could have just decimated the entire humanoids because they're smarter, they're faster, they ran better, they were much better hunters, they were much better predators.
They outnumbered us 2-1. They were stronger and faster, and yes, there was we were prey animals for the largest majority of our existence on Earth. We were prey with a fight-flight, behavior just like any skittish horse that you ever saw. However, we became calmer and more trusting and more open. Like I said, we became more oxytocin-like. Something was going on between the great environmental shifts that were happening during the Ice Age, the boom and the bust, the thawing and the freezing, that triggered basic changes in the nervous system of animals like the wolf and us, and brought us closer and closer together. And I am contending that it is what you see is a rise in oxytocin dominance over fight-flight. So a triumph of curiosity over paranoia. And that is what brought some wolves who, let's say, remember, everybody makes a different amount of oxytocin, has a more robust system than others. Some wolves were more social and less paranoid. Some humans were more social and less paranoid. And some wolves and some humans were able to read one another's social signals well enough and interact for the first time. And then once that happens, it started. Now, another very important thing to remember is there's all across the anthropological record, women in primitive tribes suckled young animals and still do in the Amazon basin. This is a common thing. You're not going to go to 7-Eleven and get puppy chow. If we got wolf pups and brought them around the campfire in our kinship groups in the Ice Age, and those puppies started crying, as they would, the urge to pick them and hold them to our breast as women, because of oxytocin, would have been almost overpowering, because that's what women do in primitive tribes all throughout the world. And we know
even to present day, they're still doing that.
Yeah, well, where you can find them, where there still are primitive tribes, but in the Amazon basin, that is correct. They are still doing it. And in other places, too. This is the way you keep babies alive, no matter what species they are. And pet keeping is common throughout the world in primitive tribes. It does not matter whether they have any economic value at all. People want to keep pets, which means women suckle them and have suckled them historically. Now, nursing a pup would release a tremendous amount of oxytocin in the woman and the puppy. So there's just no telling what happened with the first wolf pups we held to our breasts, except that we got dogs, and that is such a huge shift that only a major influx and dominance of oxytocin could have created such an event.
And it's not just even, I can see the nursing woman, but any child that I've ever seen, when they're presented with a baby animal, and I don't care if it's a baby rat or baby cat or dog or pony, there seems to be that connection between them. And tell us about the studies, or the discovery, I should say, that they found in Belgium of what appears to be a child and this new emerging dog.
Well, it's actually in France. Belgium discovered a skull that dates back to 32,000 years ago that is a dog, and that rolls the clock back twice as far in the fossil record. The oldest dog skull prior to that was 17,000 years ago. So that's really causing a lot of eyes to pop in the world of dog domestication. But in France, in Chauvet Cave, which is the oldest cave that has the fabulous artwork, the paintings of all the thousands, well, in Chauvet it's hundreds and hundreds of animals painted all over the caves from 32,000 to 22,000 years ago, over and over. That's what people painted, because that's what people had on their minds. We were an animal-centric people. We had grown-ups staring at them. I mean, when I say grown-up, I mean evolved. We had evolved staring at them. Our life and our death depended on how closely we stared at animals. So it's just such a different brain than we have now, or emphasis and focus. But so here in this cave of this fabulous art, in the floor, in the damp clay floor, they found footprints of a dog. And walking right alongside. And dog
footprints look different than a wolf print, correct?
Yeah, the middle toe is shorter. Okay. And so they definitely think it's a dog. And walking along a barefoot beside it are the footprints of a barefoot boy about 10 years old. Another thing, they can determine gender from the shape of the foot, and age too. And the boy carried a torch, and he marked the wall with the torch as he went through, and it left this burning resiny, waxy resin on the wall that they can carbon date. And they believe now that they know that the boy took this walk 27,000 years ago. The footprints of the wolf crossed the boy's, and they believe it is that the dog was accompanying the boy. Now, until they find footprints of the boys crossing the wolves, or the dogs rather, they can't be certain that they were there at the same time. But it certainly looks like it. And so that's the other thing. So now we have a dog skull saying 32,000 years ago. These footprints implying 27,000 years ago. And so that puts us way, way, way back in prehistory for dogs to have started to appear as companions, physiologically. And by the way, we know that the same changes that happen evolutionarily that make a dog look like a dog instead of a wolf, when you have that change, the behavior comes with it. So the shortening of the skull and a lot of the other behaviors. And
that's not just a theory. There's a Russian study that was done, correct?
That's the Russian study that was done with both foxes and other species, too, that show that with tameness comes these physical changes that Belyaev, the Russian scientist in the 1950s to 70s, who did this with foxes, took wild foxes and bred them just for tameness, just selected the tamest and allowed them to breed together, and came up with something that looks a lot more like a dog and acts just like one. So we know now that tameness, selecting for tameness, which makes a lot of sense that we would have done that, kept the friendliest wolves around us, just like we keep the friendliest dogs around us and not the others, could have started this whole morphing of the body and the temperament as well came together. And we ended up with a dog. And that it could have happened, it could have happened faster than we realized, because it only took Belyaev 20 years to produce a dog-like fox, a domesticated fox, when he started doing this. But even if it didn't, we could have had a much more relaxed relationship with friendly wolves. If wolves had decided, if enough chemistry had happened between us that they just weren't eating us and they were shadowing us and we were scavenging off one another's kills, those kind of symbiotic relationships happen all the time in nature. We could have had a very relaxed kind of détente at a distance for tens of thousands of years before we actually started to come together in that kind of intimate contact that releases the oxytocin and just changes everything.
Actually, in this upcoming special of National Geographic Channel and Man-Made Dog, there is a theory that when we brought these wolves into, basically joined the pack and the clan, that having those wolves around, man as such was finally able to sleep, and they weren't always sleeping with one eye open, and this allowed them to start having this creative expression of painting on walls and such.
Well, this is a theory that I have put forth, because we know that with domestication in the foxes that I was talking about, Belyaev studies, along with tameness and licking and a curly tail and floppy ears, the foxes started barking. Foxes don't bark. Wolves don't bark. They do as puppies. They do a little bit sometimes, but basically we know wolves howl. Our dogs definitely bark. So with tameness came the bark. Now, if, it's very clear that we were, as I said, preyed upon creatures, that we were surrounded, totally outnumbered, outweighed, outflanked, outpowered by many carnivores that would have wanted to eat us. That does not make for a solid night's sleep. One thing we know now is that slow alpha wave sleep and REM sleep are critical to the kinds of learning and memory and creative thinking that we do. Anybody who's ever pulled an all-nighter, finds that they're not the sharpest knife in the drawer the next morning. Well, but to get the kind of sleep, to know that there was a very powerful animal with better night senses than we ever had. We're visual creatures. Imagine how dark the nights were in the Ice Age, before electricity, period. You had some dark nights. We were very vulnerable at night. So to have a dog, a camp dog, that would smell and hear approach of anything that would have been potentially deadly to us, and bark and help keep it away, but mainly to sound the alarm, would have allowed us to get our first good night's sleep. And I contend that what you find with the skull in Belgium and the dog tracks along with the child's tracks in Chauvet puts the dog in our vicinity, puts an animal that could bark and be friendly to us right at the time you see this burst of creative expression. So it does kind of support that whole thinking. And so that's one of the notions that we're putting forward, that in our show, is that let's think about this. What does the evidence tell us? We have evidence of dog and we have evidence of humans becoming artists at the same time. That does not necessarily have to be a coincidence.
Meg, I could continue on with this conversation for another hour or two because I find this fascinating. And there are so many things that you brought up. I mean, right now with this craziness that we have in our world, it seems like we should all, get a good night's sleep and getting some more oxytocin. And I know you just can't inject it, inhale it, or eat it and get the response that we want. So maybe we should all go out and get ourselves some pets. But one thing I do think that everyone should go out and get is your book. Give me the name of it again and where they can get it.
It's called Made for Each Other, The Biology of the Human-Animal Bond, and it's published by Da Capo Press, and it's just out in paperback. So I hope everybody will get it. And you can't get the oxytocin at this time, and we may never have an oxytocin pill. And it does appear that your best bet for getting this kind of social and stress relief is through our animals. They seem to be one of the most effective triggers of this brain chemistry that we, quite frankly, can't live without.
So don't take a pill, take a pet. Much healthier for you.
Only if you're going to take good care of it.
Definitely. And then bring it to your veterinarian at least twice a year for a wellness checkup. This is Dr. Bernadine Cruz. We've been chatting today with Meg Olmert. Has some fantastic information of why there truly is this bond between humans and animals. Please listen again next week. We'll be having more information on how to make you the best possible pet owner. Thank you so much for listening to The Pet Doctor. Take care.
Pets can be a wonderful addition to your life. Keeping them healthy and happy is important. Pet Life Radio presents The Pet Doctor with veterinary media consultant and veterinarian Dr. Bernadine Cruz. Whether you have a dog, cat, reptile, or rabbit, you'll find answers for your pets straight from the vets. The Pet Doctor, on demand every week, only on PetLifeRadio.com.